Kia ora te whānau and welcome to today's session. The name of this one is Empowering Rangatahi. And first and foremost, we're going to go over a couple of housekeeping stuff, which you can see on the slides. We can just be mindful of these things. That'll be great. So we're going to start with opening with karakia. I'm going to hand the modi over to Kahu, who is our wonderful guest speaker of today. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe te parata, o tira tēnā tātou. Ia māku e taki karakia hei tīmatanga hei tuapapa moe nei. Kōrero I te ahi nei, nā reira kia hihiri ake tātou. Mai arara, mai arara, mai arara, te kāhui ariki te kāhui, tipu te kāhui, tauira tuku ana. Tuku ana, te reo kia rere tuku ana, te kupu kia taka tuku ana, te taka kia mau ueha. Ueha nuku e harangi ueha tāne nui a rangi tāne whakapiripiri nāna I toka te rangi kia tūhaha, kia tūhaha. Kia tū, ke ana nuku tū, ke ana rangi ka tangi te hau, ka mātā, o ka awa te a whano, haramai te toki, haumi e, hui e, tā iki e.
Rawe. Thank you, Kahu, for opening our beautiful space today. Before we move on, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. Kia ora, I'm Wayne Taiapo. I was born and raised in South Auckland. Been a youth worker now for about 6 years. Fortunate to be back in this space. I wear multiple hats in different spaces, and it's just a privilege to be here. And I'm looking forward to sharing these. Firstly, to Kahu, I just wanted to know, you studied a number of years ago. Can you share some of your struggles during this time with the limited resources back then?
Yeah, tēnā koe, bro. Tuatahi ake, e mihi ana ki ngā ringa raupā, ki ngā kai hāpai, ngā kai whakarite o tēnei, kaupapa hira o tātou. Nōku te waimari e, te whiwhinga nui ki te kōrero, ki te pahupahu nei. Ko wai tēnei, heuri tēnei no ngā wai e rarapa, nei te karu o te ika, wai rarapa moana, kahungunu rangi tāne, ki wai rarapa tēnei e mihi atu nei. Kia ora tātou. Firstly, just thank you to everyone who put this on, and privileged really to be a Kaikōrerō here and to share a bit of my thinking, my random thoughts. Hopefully there's a bit of fluidity between them. But the main kaupapa I'll be talking about today is some of the, I suppose, the whakapapa of our empowerment and of our influence, and with the privilege as well that we have of doing so for Rangatahi. But I'll be sharing some of my own the whakapapa and the influence that I've had and how that's led to the mahi that I've done. Also, we're going to be talking about a concept in youth development called whaiwahitanga, which is an evolution, I suppose, of what we used to call youth participation. Then I'll also be touching on some of the kaupapa that I have the privilege of having being involved with and helping support. But I thought, firstly, I would just talk a bit about myself, which just to give a bit of context and just give a bit of context on the idea of the whakapapa of our influence. And so my name's Kahukura, or Kahukura William Henry Ronald Ritchie. I whakapapa to Wairarapa, but I grew up in Raglan, Whaingaroa, in Waikato. I thought I'd give my full name, Kahukura William Henry Ronald Ritchie, because I think it gives a glimpse into the worlds that I had the privilege of being raised in. My name was given to me from my Pākehā mum, and the William Henry Ronald Ritchie comes from my grandmother's whānau. William Henry was the first beagle hole to come to New Zealand, to come to Aotearoa, and Kahukura comes from Kahukura Whitia, one of our tipuna in the Wairarapa. And Ritchie is my last name. But I thought I'd give that because that came from my mum, who's Pākehā, who speaks te reo, and my parents were separated when I was quite young, but I very much grew up predominantly on my mum's side of my whānau, but immersed in te ao Māori, which probably isn't too common for many people, but it was a very interesting thing because a lot of what I seen on my taha Māori, I suppose at points anyway, reinforced some of those negative stereotypes. And there was a disconnect, I think, in my head growing up between the beautiful parts of our culture I seen growing up, of our Māori culture growing up in my whānau Pākehā, to the reality of that my whānau Māori would have been in. And I also think about that because of, I suppose, the influence. One of them being from my granddad in particular, but both my grandparents, Jane and James Ritchie. My granddad, he was Pākehā. He spent a lot of his life in service to Māori, and in particular to Waikato Tainui and the kingitanga. And he wrote a book in the 70s called Becoming Bicultural. And I find that there's this element of biculturalism on both sides of my whakapapa, and I think that very much has an influence on the work I do of rangatahi. On that side, through my granddad in particular, but also my great-grandparents and others. And on my Māori side, there's a kōrero I like to reference, which is from one of our tipuna in the Wairarapa, Hamuera Tamaho Mahupuku, who was the premier of the Māori Parliament for a while. And he said, ko te mātauranga o te Māori he moana, ko te mātauranga o te Pākehā he moana anō i te wāhi ka whakawhiti e rā moana e rua he kai mā tātou, which is the knowledge base of Māori is one ocean, the knowledge base of non-Māori is another. Where those two oceans come together, there's food for us all. And so I grew up speaking reo. I was very fortunate. My dad also learnt our reo so that we could be raised with it. And then when I was about 11, I went to Kura Auraki, mainstream, that's probably not the right word, Pākehā school, and it was a small rural school. And I'd grown up in an area school, but in the Ropu Aroha te reo, in the reo pā. And when I moved to this Pākehā school, all of the jokes that were being made were often about my friends. And so I started to form this disconnect about what it meant to be Māori and this negative perspective, because I didn't want to be the butt of others' jokes. And so from there, that was sort of reinforced through high school. And it wasn't until I started doing youth work, I started volunteering at BGI, and then started doing an internship here the next year. And then had the privilege of being a part of a kaupapa, a Rangatahi Māori kaupapa called Tuia, where for the first time since being a kid and being proud to be Māori, that understanding or that disconnect was reconnected in my brain, and I started to realize the beauty of our culture. And because I was studying youth development at the time, I really wanted to marry, I suppose, or bridge the gap, and so started going to as many kaupapa, rangatahi kaupapa as possible, and was fortunate to be mentored and supported by many amazing youth workers and people as such. And yeah, that's pretty much, I think, the context of where I come from. I've been doing youth work now for about 7 years. I'm quite privileged, I think, to be pulled into the Rangatahi Day. I think I'm quite quickly aging out of that category, but a lot of what I'll talk about was done when I was still within the Ministry of Youth Development's under 24. But yeah, still Rangatahi, particularly mentally. But yeah, that's pretty much a bit about me. You had a question about study, did you, Wayne? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Wayne.
Aroha mai. Yeah, sorry, the question, I just wanted to, could you share a bit about like what that looked like for you studying and the limited resources then versus now?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so as Wayne sort of touched on, I got to study youth development alongside my internship. Ended up getting my bachelor's, and I think in that period there was this transition in the youth work or youth development sector from the YDSA, which was the Youth Development Strategy Aotearoa, to a new framework called Mana Taiohi, which is more Aotearoa centric and focuses on the mana and mauri and of Rangatahi and how we can then, as youth workers, create space and allow that to thrive. And in that period, in my first couple of years of study, there was all this talk about youth participation, and I never really felt much grip to that concept, and it didn't click with me really. And then when they redeveloped the YDSA and brought out this new framework called Mana Taiohi, they changed youth participation to whaiwahitanga. And that was in my last year of study, and I think I was 20 or 21 at the time. And I started getting really hoha because they were wanting us to write about whaiwahitanga and run a group of rangatahi where we encouraged whaiwahitanga, but they were just talking about it as if it was participation, and they were we were having to learn all of these participation models from overseas that just didn't really make sense, and to me, it wasn't whaiwahitanga. And I was getting increasingly frustrated, particularly with this one assignment in particular. Anyway, I ended up getting hoha on my way to work one day and talking to my partner and sort of said to her, I said, I just don't understand why we have to learn these hierarchical frameworks that they don't make sense. They're not responsive to rangatahi. They're not responsive to mauri. Why doesn't someone just create something that's real quick? It would be so easy. We put different states of mauri and represent them through our atua. We have the different responses that we can, how we respond as youth workers, and it's about being responsive to the time and the place that these rangatahi are sitting in when we engage with them. And so, as I was saying that, I was like, oh, that's a pretty flash idea. Maybe I should do something about it. And went home and I had to present the next day on this group that I'd been running. And I realized as I was writing my presentation and writing the line, writing out this presentation that I had to present at 9 a.m., I just realized that I was just going to be talking a lot of taka, a lot of tiko, and it wasn't true. And so instead of I was getting hoha, I put it to the side and I just started working on this model. Hit about 1 a.m. And I realized that I hadn't done anything for the presentation. And so, but I'd created this rough outline. Anyway, long story short, that then, and this I think coming back into the whakapapa of empowerment, I had people that invested in me. And so the likes of Rod Baxter and Jane Zintel, who were editors on a youth work journal called Kaikōrerō. They contacted me and said, hey, would you like to be a guest editor? We're doing this edition around whaiwahitanga. And I said, oh, yeah, might as well, I suppose. But we jumped on a Zoom and they said, do you have any particular interest in this? And I said, the reason I'd be keen to be an editor is because I haven't seen anything really that speaks to whaiwahitanga and isn't participatory theory. And so I said, I got so frustrated with it, I made this model when I was studying last year. And they asked to look at it and then encouraged me, voluntold me to write an article around it. And so I'm not going to actually dive too deep into that model partly because I also don't like calling it a model. I like calling it tikanga whaiwahitanga because to me, tikanga is adaptable and it changes and it's responsive to the needs and to the context of young people. And so part of the reason I'm not going to go into this tikanga whaiwahitanga too in depth is because we're currently doing a bit of redevelopment on it. And as passion projects go often, it's a bit slow. So the journal it's in is this one here. It's Kaipara whaiwahitanga, Rediscovering the Future of Youth Participation. And the model, I'll just show you briefly, should have appreciated this one. It's just here. And so the main basis of this model is that rangatahi, when we engage with them, their mauri is sitting in different spaces, and those are represented through our different atua. And then on the corresponding side is how we create space or allow space for rangatahi to come from te pō into te ao marama. Um, the other key part about that is because when I talk about the difference between participation and whaiwahitanga, I think what helps me understand it is thinking about groups like Ngā Tamatoa, for example, where if without them, our country, our Māori would be many steps behind, but they weren't participating in anything. They weren't participating in society. Society was against them. The media was against them. Often some of our own kaumatua and iwi were like, who we used to do this, and so they weren't participating in next to anything. But what they were doing was practicing and actively practicing whaiwahitanga. I'll just apologize. I don't have slides, but I'm just going to be switching between a couple different random things that I have in front of me and a whiteboard behind me, and I'm going to do a bit of a tutu on there. And that was partly because I was going to try and rush some slides this morning, and my coworker said, "Bro, I think instead of doing slides, encourage people to take notes, and also maybe just if you need to write anything down, do it on a whiteboard." And so that's my encouragement to users is to take notes if you can, and if you want. Heoi. We'll move into the next thing. I think the other real key part of that model is it's based around our creation story. And I think when I think about empowering rangatahi, the key thing that I think about, or what I aspire to do in my mahi with rangatahi is to be a hinatore, or a little glimpse of light, or a little glimpse of the what's beyond the confines of someone's reality. And the hinatore, that word comes from our creation story when Rangi and Papa were bound. The reason why Tāne was able to separate his parents over the other children was because in one of their shifts, in one of their embraces, in one of the nights, one of te pō, there was a little glimpse of light that shone through as they were switching position. And in that glimpse of light, Tāne knew that there was more beyond the confines of his parents. And so that was what gave him the strength to be able to consistently push and break free and be sort of the original example of whaiwahitanga. And so that's I think in anyone who's working with rangatahi, that's my encouragement. That's what I try to do, is to be a hinatore, is to be that glimpse that shows the extent of their horizon, the potential that they have. Yeah, I think that's my call.
Beautiful. That is so nice to hear that. One of the key words that came up for me as you were talking, just from that short amount of time, was removing barriers and creating opportunities. Beautiful insights in terms of the theory and stuff like that. I love that. Can you please share some of your mahi and how these practical examples are related back into that model?
Yeah, cool. Kia ora, bro. Yeah, I love theory, I love frameworks, but I much prefer actually working and spending time and empowering rangatahi. So yeah, I think I've got another thing in front of me, and I'm going to talk a bit about a kaupapa that we run. But this here is a print that was made from some of our rangatahi that were involved in a kaupapa we run, which is running wānanga with rangatahi Māori in a couple of different high schools around Pōneke. And the context of this print is encapsulated in this image is our whole kaupapa from their perspective. And it's also a framework for what the kaupapa is trying to achieve, or how it rolls. And before I go into that a little bit more, how that came about, and I think this is coming into the whaiwahitanga stuff, is after the first year of running these wānanga, we pulled together, we put an open invite out to anyone who had been involved to come and have wānanga around how we progress it. Is it worth progressing? Do we continue it? We're into our 6th year running it now. And at that wānanga, we put out the question, if this one, should it continue? And everyone that was there decided that it should. And then put to the room, if it is to continue, how do we make it a sustainable kaupapa? That was the one question. How is it going to be sustainable so that it can feed rangatahi for as long as possible, if we see it fit? And so I posed that question to the room of about maybe 20 rangatahi, and then left, and I went and cooked dinner, and then finished dinner, and I went in to say, are you ready? The guy's ready? And they were like, oh no, we need another hour. So pushed dinner back again, and then had our kai, and then they were like, we need probably like another hour. And so pushed back kai back again, and then went into the room, and the beautiful wānanga that had happened, essentially, the fruit of that wānanga was this framework. And the basis of that framework is whakatauki that is e kore te tōtara e tū noi te pārai, engari e tū i te wao nui, which is a tōtara doesn't stand out in the open plains, but it stands in the context of the ngahere of the forest of Tāne. And so in this framework, they said, I think our job, or this kaupapa, what it's doing, what it is it's a manuka. And manuka are pioneering plants. They're one of the plants that we plant when we when soil's been degraded and we want to revive it and bring back health, and because they're resilient, they're tough, they can grow where other stuff can't necessarily. And so they described this kaupapa as a manuka, and the purpose is to create shelter so that the seeds of the tōtara and create a bit of a canopy so the seeds of the tōtara can grow through being our rangatahi. And then there's all these other many concepts that they put into it. But that kaupapa, again, there's whakapapa to that kaupapa. And so tuia, which I was involved in, before I was a part of it, there were rangatahi in a similar position to myself who were saying, why are we waiting for people to be 18 plus to be a part of this kaupapa? We need to do stuff younger. And so they came, they started running these rangatahi wānanga around the country. And then I was privileged enough to go and sit in on some of those, and then design it to fit, or design a kaupapa to fit our kura in Woneke, the kura that I went to as well, and didn't necessarily, or didn't find belonging in kapahaka, and didn't necessarily find belonging in our reo Māori class. And beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot at the time to show the breadth of our and beauty of our Māori. And so they designed that, and one of them then put it into a print, into that you've seen, and then we have wānanga every year to reassess and think about it and grow it and make sure that it is still serving its purpose, and it is continuing to build its sustainability. The other kaupapa I was quite keen to talk about is a new one. We started this year, and that's called Kitao, which was a name given from one of the rangatahi involved. This came out of an idea, essentially, that then we took to some rangatahi, and they started to grow and grow. The idea was to run a big, large-scale rangatahi conference festival type event, and these rangatahi started building this beautiful kaupapa. We had a bit of a roadblock. The funding that we thought we had doesn't actually. There was stuff that we had missed in the funding, which meant that they wanted it to be different to the vision of the rangatahi, and so we made a call alongside the rangatahi to instead push the kaupapa back a year, rather than to try and change it from the vision that these young people had, to push it back a year, and hopefully we'll see that brought to life sort of May next year. But a part of that kaupapa, when we were trying to think, how do we really run this rōpū? How do we empower these rangatahi to take ownership and be safe within it? And through that kōrero, we came up with another framework, which I'm going to draw up on this whiteboard, which comes from a Te Arawa kōrero, which is Hangaia tō whare kōrero. And because they have the kawa, or the tikanga on their marae is paeke, which means that the haukainga, the home people speak, and then the manuhiri speak, and then it's done. And you don't have any debating, you don't have any, once you've said your kōrero, you've said it, and it's out in the open. And so the idea is to build your kōrero like a whare. And so when we were thinking, how do we really make sure that these young people are safe and make sure that this kaupapa is strong and make sure that they get everything they need and have the input that they need to have and all of those kind of things, we thought of that kōrero. Well, essentially what we're trying to do with these rangatahi is build a whare. We're trying to collectively build a whare so that when at this conference or at this festival, when they're out in the open, that it's strong and things can't tear down their whare. And so we going to grab my whiteboard, and I didn't make that print, so hopefully this is legible. And so the basis at the base of the whare, or before the foundation, a little bit reflective, we have the whenua. I'll push hard. The whenua. Oh yeah, that's not very visible. If red's a bit better. Yeah, that's a bit better, but it's backwards. All good. The whenua in this context is everything that the rangatahi are bringing in before we start to build this whare. That's their whakapapa, that's their homes, their connections, their friendships that they already have. Everything, the whole context of their lives, their mauri, that's everything that they're coming in with. It's the diversity too, in order to have healthy soil, we need to have diversity in our soil. Then we have our tuapapa, which is the foundation of our whare. And our foundation of our whare is the things when all else fails, when all the walls get ripped down on our whare, when a big storm happens, what's going to still hold strong? What's going to be there? And for what we what we theorized, I suppose, in this rōpū was those things are the relationships we have with each other and how we build high trust quality relationships with each other, and the tikanga that we set as a tira, as a group, because it's our tikanga that'll give us stability, I suppose, and forming those real strong relationships so that when stuff gets a bit harder, we can lean on each other. Then we've got on the side of our whare, we have the tirewa, which is our scaffolding. And our scaffolding, this kōrero, the tirewa kōrero comes from Kahu Ritchie on the East Cape, who talked about his koro, who was his great-grandfather who was around pre-European settlement on the East Coast. And he gave a kōrero saying, essentially, we need to grow our rangatahi like we would our kumara, and that we need to build a scaffolding around them, a tirewa, in order for them to grow well and be able to climb to the heights that they climb to. And so our role as kaimahi, or as the facilitators or the people growing or empowering these rangatahi, is to just be a scaffolding. It's just to be a hinatore. It's to be there so that they can climb and grow and yeah, they've got the right support there. Then we have our pātū of our whare, or the walls. Our pātū. Our pātū, they represent all of the skills, all the tools, all of the development, all the learnings that want to be taking place, the things that are going to strengthen our walls, the things that are going to make us strong. So, for example, in this rōpū rangatahi, they identified that they would really like to do strengths finders and get strengths coaching, which is the Clifton Strengths thing. They also talked about wanting to go and see other festivals and go and see other kaupapa similar so that they could get an understanding of what they had looked like in other places. They talked about wanting to do conflict resolution stuff because they foresaw that there might be points of stress or pressure, and they would like to understand how to navigate that well with each other. And so those are our part two, the things that are going to upskill us and make us stronger to be able to do our mahi well. Then we have our roof or our whakaruruhau, our shelter. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's good enough. Our whakaruruhau, and that's the stuff that's going to protect us from, as we're out in the open, as we're in the downpour, the things that are going to shelter us. And so what was identified for with the soropu for that part is that is all the external relationships we have people. So in this example, it would be like having St. John's at the kaupapa, so that if there's any big health and safety events, they could step in. They also identified other key organizations that are involved, partners, those kind of people being a safety net as well. It was also, in particular, it was making sure that we were well planned and we were well organized and we'd done everything we could in the lead up so that we're not dropped in the deep end, essentially. If we're all our planning, our run sheets, everything is all solid, then that's going to help shelter us. And then in the center of our whare is our kōrero. Holy, that is looking crooked. All good. Our kōrero, and that's the face. That's the face of our kaupapa, essentially. And so what was identified as that was the name for this kaupapa. It was ki te ao. That was the branding, all that kind of stuff. But it was also the vision. And so that's what people saw. That's what people wanted to see in this kaupapa. And that's also what brought quite a lot of life, I think, to this. It was focusing in on that kōrero. The final part of the whare, well, not the final, there's a couple other whakaaro, but the final part I'll talk about. When we go into our whare nui, we don't often see an empty room. Very rarely. I don't know if I've gone to a whare that's just an empty room. And so is the whakarake, it's the adornments. And that was all of the actioning. That was the fun stuff. That was going to another festival. That was going. That's in the moment. The doing. That's the going and visiting some of the external partners and providers that were going to support the kaupapa. It's all the stuff that just is fun to do. Really, the games, all that kind of stuff. That makes our whare beautiful. And that's essentially the basis of this framework and of this model. And so why I decided to not try and do like a real rough design is because we've only ever used this on a whiteboard, essentially, because every time we've visited it, it's been alongside Rangatahi, and it's been like writing it up at the start and then refilling out what is the whare we're trying to build together. What do we need? Where it's maybe our whare, where do we need to strengthen it? And this whare, I think, is what really gave us the knowledge that we needed to say, we'll push this kaupapa back to make sure that it stays true to the kōrero, stays true to the vision. Whakarake. Not that you could probably even read that, but all good. So yeah, that framework, it's very fresh. But hopefully if you're empowering rangatahi, think about it in that, you can think about it in that way of trying to build a whare alongside them that allows them to stand strong in whatever context or whatever rōpū or one-on-one that it is. How are you supporting, how are you being a tiriwa scaffolding so that rangatahi or those rangatahi can build this whare and build it strong so that it can withstand the elements. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my yarns on some of the mahi. I've had a privilege, I think, of doing heaps of beautiful mahi alongside rangatahi and being inspired and empowered by them more so than I've probably done for them. And yeah, I think just it's fun. I love working with rangatahi.
Rauhoe, kahu. It's absolutely beautiful, your kōrero, and given, where you started, you talked about those dynamics growing up in both Te Ao Pākehā and Māori. And those conflicts have, I guess, led you down a path of going into the youth sector and seeing something that I guess needed updating. and we're here today and you're sharing this beautiful model. Something that stood out to me, for any of those who are familiar with the Te Whare Tapawhā, awesome model. And it's what I've just seen from you in that short explanation is it's almost like, what is the point in having a house if you can't maintain it? And it's the tools that you can equip yourself and rangatahi with, which is what this framework that you've just shared with us. That's absolutely amazing. Is there any final kōrero you would like to add before we move to Q&A?
Yeah, cool. Kia ora. Yeah, I think just really an emphasis on that whakapapa of influence. I know, and there's probably stuff that I'm not aware of that has influenced my understanding of the world and therefore what I share and what I try to inspire rangatahi with. But one thing I really try to do is to think critically and to reflect backwards on the people, on the kaupapa, on the friends, on the whānau that have influenced my thinking in the way and empowered me or disempowered me, and how that changes my understanding and my I think my worldview is probably the way of putting it, and therefore what influence I have on rangatahi. Because if I hadn't had that reconnection in my brain and I was still doing this mahi with rangatahi, I could very well be having a very different influence on rangatahi where I think, oh, nah, you don't need to engage with that Māori stuff. Just do go to law school. Not that there's anything wrong with it. But because I had that influence, I suppose the way that I try to empower rangatahi is different, but I also try to be quite critical because I think it's real easy to, especially when you're working with rangatahi, to just say stuff without necessarily thinking about the context and the whakapapa and what's driven that way of thinking. But there's so many people, there's so many influences, there's so many kaupapa that I hold a huge amount of gratitude towards for the empowerment and the influence that they've had on my life, on my worldview, on the mahi that I get to do. And the mahi that I get to do with rangatahi is because of them. And so, I just think, remember that whakapapa, reflect backwards critically, think about where you're at and what you're doing critically, so that you're able to move forward well and empower rangatahi in the best way possible.
Ooh, beautiful. Amazing, actually. Something I was just going to add quickly in there. What would be one key advice you would give to your younger self?
Probably get an ADHD diagnosis. Nah. What would I just give to my advice so I could die myself? I think I would tell myself to use my time wisely and to try and learn and engage and um engage in the stuff that I found meaningful, because I think a lot of what I was doing was because of those influences that I had in my life, both good and bad, and both wanting good and not so. And so, but one thing I wish, not I wish I'd done, but I would tell myself is to really dive deep into the stuff that you believe in and you find meaningful and you want to grow your understanding in. Because I do a lot of that now, and I wish that I'd used, especially the amount of time that we often find ourselves with as rangatahi, to really dive into those things and grow them, I suppose.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions, Q&A time. We have one question from the chat, and that is, how have you used these models to aid in helping rangatahi to work through different mental health issues?
Cool. Yeah, awesome. There's a few examples that come to mind. I'm just trying to make sure that I articulate them well. At one point, actually just probably the year that I created the first model that I was talking about. I had a rangatahi who was sort of grossly uh, uh, taken advantage of by the justice system, I would say. Essentially, he got into a fight with his whānau when he was nearing on sort of psychosis, and they couldn't deal with it, so they called the police. He then got put into rimutaka because it was on his birthday, and he was his 18th birthday, I believe, and his birthday happened to be the day before New Year's, and so the cells were full, and there was no place for him to go on bail, and so he went to rimutaka as an 18-year-old nearing on psychosis. In there, got realized his psychosis, I suppose, or ended up in psychosis. And then I got a call from his nan on New Year's Day, and she said, "Hey, I just don't know what to do. They've got nowhere to send him. Do you have any ideas?" And I said, "Oh, I'll give his bail officer a call and see if he can come stay with me," which I did. But then he said, "No, it's all good. We've got him a bail address," which he was there for about 4 hours before he got attacked and then got sent back to Rimutaka. And I said to them, I said, "Tell me if that doesn't work out so that he can come." And then I hadn't heard anything. I was on summer holidays, so my brain was not necessarily all there. And then got a call from his nan 2 weeks later saying, "Hey, the reef's still in Rimutaka. Do you have any or this young fella's still in Rimutaka. Do you have any like ways of supporting him?" And I said, "Why is he there?" I talked to this bail person. Anyway, this going big tangents. He ended up living with us for about 6 months or so. And I supported him through that psychosis and used that framework of understanding Te Po and Te Ao Marama and where our Māori sat, and through in discussions with him would have daily check-ins of like, where do you reckon you're sort of sitting today, and within this space, and where's your Māori sitting? How is it feeling? Are you feeling life in there? We were using the atua to describe them, and so we'd have those daily check-ins. And I was only a year or 2 years older than this young fella. And it was a real interesting period, and very grateful to have had the opportunity to support him. We'll go into all his sessions with him as a support. But I think that framework meant that in those mornings, every morning we'd do karakia and would check in. We'd go, "Sweet, where is your Māori at? In this morning." In the evening, check in again, and started to see over that time as he was coming out of his psychosis, the language he would use. He would be like, "I'm definitely feeling myself coming more into Te Ao Marama over this last couple of days," or stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think it's again, we're doing a bit of redevelopment on that model, but on that tikanga. But I got a lot of learning out of that one. There was another real simple one where this young fella had just been in a fight with his nan, with his mum, sorry, and he hadn't slept all night, and I picked him up, and I was like, "You're seem a bit off," and we were meant to go diving, and I said to him, I said, "Bro, I'm just keen for you to, because we had talked about this, keen for you to think about, those atua and where currently your Māori is sitting, if your Māori was an atua." And he went straight to tūmatawenga, and I was like, "Sweet, I don't think." I didn't say this, but in my head I was like, "I don't think like going into it was meant to be our first dive in the ocean." And I was like, "I don't think that's necessarily the best call because he hasn't slept." And I said, "What we'll do, bro, is just to help, bring you into Te Ao Marama. You seem like you're in Te Po." Or I think he actually said he was, yeah, um, anyway, instead we just drove to the ocean. We had a kai, and then he slept the whole car ride back. I did a 40-minute drive or so out to Makara, and then he slept the whole way back. by the time we got out, I checked in with him again. I said, where do you think you're sitting? And he said, yeah, in the rongomatane sort of space. And so he'd gone from there, and it said, I think, and the fruit of that was that he ended up going in and apologizing to his mum, which wasn't anything I said. He told me about that later, and sitting down and having a good kōrero with her. Yeah, yeah, I think that's in terms of mental health specific kōrero. I think that's probably my examples.
Thank you, Kahu. That was actually a beautiful response. And what a result. What a result for, being able to use this in a real practical way. I do have another question from our chat, and it is, kia ora kahu. Awesome kōrero, heaps of non-youth work organizations, health, education, justice, etc. are tasked with addressing a narrow topic or scope, where rangatahi are a target community. What's your advice for those looking to reorient that mahi in a way that privileges rangatahi and their aspirations while still working with the scope to keep the funders, decision makers supportive? Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Kia ora, mean pātai. What a constant and challenging balance, between what these outcomes or these funding expectations and stuff require versus what's actually beneficial for these rangatahi. I think part of it, obviously, this can't always be the case, but is what's our responsibility in trying to push back and trying to find alternatives on those people that are telling us this is the only way you can, or this is what we need out of these rangatahi, or this is what we need you to do. That's part of it, is trying to remove barriers, trying to create space to allow for what's really beneficial to happen. But that's not always the case, and I think part of it, in terms of that hangaia to whare, like building that whare, is if you don't get to set the kōrero, if you don't get to set the kaupapa, what the vision is for the group or for the rangatahi you're working with, if that's already been set by these funders or by your managers or whoever, and they're saying you need to do these, this is the vision, this is what you've got to do, then I think what the ideal would be is to sit with the rangatahi and say, explain the kōrero, explain the face of that kaupapa, what the purpose, what you're trying to get to is, and then say, what do you think in terms of the rest of this whare we can build together in order to allow that to happen? And so is it that if you're what was the examples? Justice. I do quite a bit of work in the youth justice sector, and so it could be, and often in that, the vision is set out in court. They're not going to reoffend. They're going to have curfew 9 to 5 or 7 to 7 or whatever it is. They're going to get mentoring, whatever. So you can sit with that. You could sit with that rangatahi and say, look, this is what's already been outlined. This is the vision that they have for this kaupapa. But in order for us to get there, because I think there's very few rangatahi that I've worked with that don't want to be out of court. They don't want to be in there. They don't want to be off these plans or whatever. So that's the vision, and you might not agree with some of it. And I think that's when it's on us. Like, I've sat in FGCs and said to social workers or to police or whoever, that this isn't going to work. If this young person thinks that what you're doing is not fair or it's not just, then it's just not going to work. And often that falls on deaf ears sometimes. Not often, yeah, sometimes. But it's pushing back, I think, a little bit. And then, what's the fun? They could go straight to the fun, because that's always a helpful thing to build a bit of motivation, particularly if they don't have a lot of say on where they're heading or on the vision. What's the fun stuff that we can do? What's the adornments? What's the whakarake that we can make to make this whare beautiful and make it still a home and make it still a beautiful whare? What's the tuapapa? What's going to be there if all else fails? Is it that we build a really strong relationship? Is it your relationship with your whānau, with your parents, with whoever, with your mates, and then how can we strengthen those relationships? Is it the part two? What skills might you need if you're doing if you're wanting to get into a mechanics course? Is there ways that we can try and link you up with a fella that we know that does a bit of mechanic stuff? What kind of skills can we build that will help you get to that plan or achieve that? And then whakaruru, what's going to shelter you in it? Is it again? What could be whānau again? It could be making sure that they set a plan that you're going to give weekly check-in or daily check-in messages that just ask how the different pits are going. It could be that when you have a catch up, they just have 30, or you just have a kai, and that's going to help keep them grounded because they have a good feed. They just get to have a chill out. They get to have a rest. Yeah, could be lots of different things, but that's one for Carlo. I think, yeah, it was a bit of a long-winded kōrero, but I think, yeah, part of it is our responsibility to push back when we don't feel like things are actually there to serve rangatahi, and then they're more to serve ourselves or our kaupapa or our organizations or our bosses or our funders. So part of it is a bit of pushback. And I think also knowing when it's just, like I think with these funders, for example, knowing that just wouldn't work for the vision of these rangatahi, and so it's knowing when to bite the bullet and just say no. But that's not always the easiest. So yeah, the other part is trying to still build that whare which work and make it work for the rangatahi, and make it still as much as within the confines, make it work.
You're an absolute gem. You're an absolute gem, Kahu. Thank you for being the voice and the champion of our young people, our rangatahi. I do have one more question that will probably be our final question for the moment. And it is, love your kōrero and mahi, Kahu. Thank you for sharing. Life can be hard just surviving for getting shelter and kai. What can individual suburbs or communities do or provide for rangatahi to have fun available?
Yeah, awesome. It's a great question. I would say, how can you support rangatahi to create those spaces within their communities? One part I didn't chuck on this model is our mahi, where I work, the organization I work for, BGI. We have this beautiful Pōtoko manawa that runs up the center of our whare. And that has our full history as an organization carved onto it by I Haiapuke Tapua Te Tiawa Kawa. And one of our beliefs, I think, as an organization, one of our beliefs as an organization is to empower and support rangatahi to stand as Pōtoko manawa for their own hapori, for their own communities, their iwi, whoever. And so I think and limited resources is real, but I think rangatahi they know what's fun for them. They know what they're going to enjoy. They know what's actually going to be meaningful. And so if we can do whatever we can within our limited scope to help them stand as those to help them hold up the heart of their communities, to help them create spaces, even if it's just going down to the basketball. They want to play basketball, no one's facilitating anything. There's fights on the court, lots or whatever. Going down with a whistle and playing some stuff could be as simple as that, or it could be, rallying funders to go and have a hui with some rangatahi who are saying we need a skate park in our community, or whatever it is. I think young people know way better than us what's actually going to be beneficial for them and what spaces they need in order to thrive.
Nā mihi nui ki a koutou e homa. Kahu, thank you so much. Beautiful kōrero. Just before we wrap, I just want to thank, firstly, Kahu, for your time, for all the effort and energy you've put into creating something for our rangatahi as time progresses, things are being updated. Keen to see you grow more in this space, and I'm looking forward to what that future looks like, not just for yourself, but for our rangatahi who is directly involved with you or anybody else in this space. Lastly, I'm going to ask you, Kahu, if you can close us for karakia after we have a few slides on. We're going to do a few slides, and we're going to thank all of our partners who are involved. ngā mahi to them. Without them, this probably would not have happened as seamless, streamlined, or organic. And last but not least, thank you to everybody else involved, either in the front or at the back, because we're all here together because of all of you guys. So I'm going to hand that mode over to you, Kahu. When you're ready, my bro, can you close us off?
Yeah, tēnā koe, bro. Yeah, nau I whakaere tēnei zānanga nei. Kamatu kia koutou katoa, ngā hoa whānui o tēnei o ngā kaupapa kua rangatira tēnei kaupapa I a koutou, kua rangatira hau I a koutou. Nā reira, kare he kupu tuatu I te mihi. Māku e taki karakia hei whakakapi I nei kōrero nei pahu nei. Nā reira, kia hihiria ke tātou. Unuhia ki te tau roterangi, kia tīna, kia whena, kia toka te manawa ora, ki te whakatipua manawa ora, ki te whakatawhito manawa ora, kia rangi nui atu nei, purutia, kia mau purutia, kia uherehere, ki te pau o te ora, kauru ora, e hai. Haumi e, hui e, tā e kia.
Okay. Well, thank
Kia
you so
ora.
much.